Whether you're a self-taught musician, have a teacher, or you're already a professional, this show is meant to help you with knowledge, mindset, craft, and strategies to improve your overall musicianship so that you can become the best musician you can be, regardless of your goals. Welcome to Musicianship Mastery. Hello, and it's great to be with you once again. My name is David Lane. This is episode number 106 of Musicianship Mastery. It's only been a day since I got back from Minneapolis, going to the MTNA convention. That's Music Teachers National Association. And I had a wonderful time. I met a lot of people, a lot of colleagues, a lot of, at least a few potential future guests on this podcast that I'm sure I'll be able to introduce you to in, who knows, maybe a matter of just a couple of months from now. And I learned quite a few things that I'm going to have to kind of reflect on, but I am sure that is going to inform what I talk about on this podcast, as well as what I do in my own teaching, some things regarding technique, pedagogy, and also just some inspiration, just kind of realize that I have a lot of work to do as a performer and a composer, and I don't just mean in terms of getting to a level that I'm satisfied with, but I'm talking about the effort that I put in my own time. One of the things that teachers can struggle with, and even performers can struggle with, and that is taking time for personal growth to keep going forward. And so that's something that I want to be thinking about, and something that might inform just some topics down the road. So anyways, way too much to talk about, and that isn't what this episode is about, but I just wanted to say that I had a great time in Minneapolis. It was fun exploring that city, as well as a little bit of St. Paul, and it was just good to reconnect with a lot of people I knew, and also meet a lot of people for the first time, and maybe some of you checking out this podcast now that we've met. So just want to say it was great to meet you, and I hope that you do enjoy this episode and any other episodes that you check out. All right, I know from comments that several of you who listen to this podcast regularly, you are how you would describe as basically a self-taught adult learner. Now, some of you do have a teacher, but you're kind of looking for some supplemental instruction. You want to hear what other people have to say about becoming a better musician. And I also happen to teach quite a few adult students, and I understand the difficulties of that. On one hand, you have the advantage of being self-motivated. You are taking lessons, or you are pursuing music solely because you want to, not because someone expected you to. That's a big deal. You also have greater capacity for critical thinking, and you're better able to appreciate the process of learning music, not just where you are in terms of markers. But let's not beat around the bush. It is harder to learn skills as an adult than it is as a child. It's not impossible, but it is harder. You also may not have the time that you had when you were just in school, especially when we're thinking about elementary school. I mean, I don't know about you. I have a little bit more time now as an adult than I did when I was in high school, for sure. Speaking of high school, in this episode, I'm chatting with someone who was a high school, I guess I shouldn't call him a classmate. We only had one class together, and that was band. He was in 12th grade when I was in 9th grade. But we did connect. We have talked quite a bit, since we both graduated high school. And one of the things that came up just not too long ago when I chatted with him for the first time in a while, really good chat, back in 2022, was his ongoing adventure to teach himself piano, and what he was doing, kind of his process and the progress that he was making. And we had another chat just a few months ago, so we'll get into kind of all of that, his journey. But this is a success story. So I'm talking with my friend Reid Harrison, and we talk about what he does during the conversation that we're about to have. But just to iterate up front, he is not a professional musician. He is probably like a lot of you. He has a day job in something that has nothing to do with music, or sometimes I think a lot of things have something to do with music, even though it's not that way. But it's a quote unquote non-music job, and he uses his skills from that non-music job in order to kind of keep track of how he's doing in this musical journey. And I think it's something that all of you, and myself included, could make use of to improve our overall practice experience. I'll share more at the end, and I'll also share some takeaways after our conversation, but let's not delay any further. Here is my conversation with Reid Harrison. Reid, it's great to talk to you again. It's been coming up on 3 years since we last chatted near your home in California.
Yeah, time flies, but that was a lot of fun.
When we met, you told me about your adventures as an adult getting into piano, and I was very interested, but it didn't occur to me at the time that would make a great podcast interview because I only had my one podcast, which was Life in the Pit, and that was about theater musicians. And then I got this podcast going. And when I checked in with you when the fires were going on, and you told me your updated progress, I realized, well, I've been talking about this very thing about, in fact, I've talked to about getting started with music at different ages. And you are someone who has decided to actually take some initiative, come up with a plan and see it through, and has made some progress. And so I guess I'm going to serve all that as a teaser. Before we talk about what you've been doing, let's go ahead and establish that you're not a professional musician. You're someone who loves music, but give us an idea of what is it you do throughout most of your days.
Yeah, my life is pretty much in the science and engineering realm. I'm an electrical engineer by training, and for 10 years I taught at a university, teaching students and doing research. And then some of that research spun off into a company that I started 15 years ago. And so I have a small company here in California, and we make small electronic devices for the neuroscience research community. Your brain runs on weak electrical impulses, and we make small devices that can measure that. So we sell to universities and research labs and hospitals all over the world, with sort of a niche product that allows them to record data and conduct medical research. I worked at the boundary between electronics, and I essentially designed electronics all my life, and then the neuroscience world. Yeah, very different than music, but you and I met back in high school, and I was in band and really enjoyed music for my childhood, but I knew it wasn't my main thing. And so aside from after I graduated from high school, I did 1 year in college in marching band, just one semester, and then that was pretty much it. But yeah, that's my background.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. You're in California, I'm in North Carolina, but we met at the same high school in Florida, a very small town that really the only music program that there was the marching band for the most part.
Yeah, that's pretty much we had concert band in the spring, but that seemed like a sort of a
Yeah.
secondary thing. I tell people that honestly band, and it was mostly a marching band, but I enjoyed concert band as well. But say that was like one of the best things I did in high school, because I was academics were my thing. I was a good student, and I was really into math and science and good at that stuff. But that's a very solitary pursuit. And I was always terrible at sports, but I said marching band was the closest I ever came to a team sport. And it was really good for me, I think, to be in something where you're really part of a team and doing something where you got to perform every week. And I really enjoyed it. I would hate to think of going through school not having done music.
Yeah. Band was definitely my highlight of high school, at least right, yeah, probably number one.
Yeah, no, we always knew we always knew music was your thing. You were really a standout musician. I think you were what, 3 years younger than me, or I graduated in 90.
Yeah. So I graduated in 93. So yeah.
So even as a, I was a senior, you were a freshman, but it was pretty clear that you were very talented and very driven, and that was you had found your thing, which is
Right.
you and I are both, I think, very lucky individuals in that unlike most people, we found our thing when we were young, and mine was science and engineering, yours was music, but yeah,
Yeah.
music has always been something that I enjoyed quite a bit.
Now I'm going to pull back the cover just a little bit because it's interesting to hear that you say that was your impression. I'd been around music for a long time and I had a very good piano teacher. In fact, even though she was 45 minutes away after we moved to our small
Hmm.
town, I still kept going to back to her and so forth. So I had a very good musical background, but I had no intention as a freshman in high school of majoring in music. It wasn't until my junior year when I got into composition that I really felt like this was an avenue in which I could explore because I didn't think it was going to be piano. I knew it wasn't going to be French horn. I was going to, I always thought I might minor in music, but it was that point when I decided to major in music. Now, your sister was in my high school class, and I recall that I didn't hear her play very much, but I'm aware that she did play piano. And
Yes, she was better than I ever got. Yeah, I should probably mention my music history real quick. It won't take long at all. But we knew each other playing trumpet in high school together. But it started for me, I still remember to this day, and I have a terrible memory, but I remember being, I think I was in third grade at the time, and I was at some function at church, and there was like a youth activity in the evening. And there was some kid, I don't even remember who it was, but he was a couple years older than me. And he played something on the piano. And it was like a kind of a pop piece or something. And I just remember it was just magical that he could just play this piece. It sounded so incredible. I'm probably pretty simple if I went back and looked at it, but it was just like, oh my God, this is like magic. And I went home and I asked my mom and dad, I said, can I learn? I don't remember how I phrased it, but I asked if I could take piano lessons or something. And I was the oldest of three kids. And so they went out and bought a piano, being the amazing parents that they were and are. They bought an upright piano and got me lined up with an instructor in town. And so for the next 2 years, I guess probably when I was in fourth and fifth grade, for 2 years, I took piano lessons once a week and I played in recitals and I ended up playing like something at one of my aunt's weddings, a little piece when I was like in fifth grade. And my mom told me I'm pretty good, which probably just means that she's a good mom. But I remember I was doing all right. But she made me practice half an hour a night because she's a good mom. And it was fine the first year. But by the second year, I just tired. What's this practicing half an hour a night? Oh my God, I don't have time for this. I'm a busy fifth grader. So I complained and complained. They made me stick it out for the through the end of the second year, and then I quit. And but then next year, sixth grade, I was in middle school, and that's when we could join band. And I guess it gave me enough of an interest in music that I wanted to be in band. And I picked trumpet, and I played trumpet, from sixth grade through 12th grade, and then one semester in college in marching band. And I think I was okay at trumpet. Certainly, I want to make very clear, I was not am not a musical prodigy. I was just a conscientious student, but I would never practice that much when I didn't have to. But I showed up and was a good student in class. But playing trumpet for 7 years, I could read music by the end of it really well, at least treble clef. And but that's pretty much where it ended at that point.
so let's flash forward or fast forward. Let's fast
Hmm.
forward to I guess what year was it that you decided, well, I guess what got you interested in taking the piano up again as an adult? And also, what did you still remember, if anything?
Yeah, I since what do you remember since you were 10? Not a lot, right? And like I said, mostly I think I could read treble clef still because of trumpet. But bass clef I completely and utterly forgotten. And I knew how to read music in terms of quarter notes, eighth notes, all that. I still remembered all that from so many years of doing that. And then, yeah, so fast forward to the pandemic. And I was about a year into the pandemic. I was getting a little stir crazy like most people. And just this isn't even related to the pandemic. I was just looking for a hobby. I just missed having a really good hobby. One of my hobbies is hiking. One of the reasons I live out west is I love the mountains and hiking, but you can't just go hiking when you get home on a Wednesday evening. You need a Saturday and you drive to the mountains and it takes a lot of time. So I needed just a hobby I could do at home on any given evening. And I thought at first that I was always interested in music theory. When I was like in college, I started wondering about music theory. Like I had a computer and you could like do primitive music composition then. And I was wondering, like, how do you make a song? You remember from our high school band, we learned zero theory. Like, I didn't even know what the circle of fifths was when I graduated from high school. It was pretty bad. So I didn't know anything about chord progressions or 1, 4, 5 chords. I had no idea of that at all. And so but I was fascinated how different types of music have different sounds. What makes jazz sound like jazz? What makes sad music sound sad? How does it work? I'm very analytical, and music is numbers. So I thought, well, now with the internet, you can look up all this stuff and you can watch YouTube videos on theory. And so you can kind of learn this stuff. So I thought at first, I want to start trying to compose music on my computer. I want to compose electronic music. That sounds like fun. I'll learn theory along the way. And I got some software and I did it for a few months. And I realized in my day job, I'm sitting in a desk in front of a computer. And when I come home at night, I don't want my hobby to be sitting at a desk in front of a computer. It's just too similar. But I got like a MIDI keyboard, one of those little 2 octave keyboards for inputting things to this music composition program. And that got me just thinking about piano again. And yeah, in March of 2021, I went to this piano store. I remember we were all still wearing masks and keeping apart and everything. But the employees showed me the pianos, and I was blown away by how good the digital pianos were. I was used to 80s and 80s style Casio keyboards with the plastic springy keys and the cheesy sounds. And they put me on a modern Yamaha digital piano with weighted keys, and the samples are recorded from a 9 foot concert grand Yamaha in like a studio. It sounds incredible, I'm sure. And I thought, and you could play it with headphones. And I thought, oh my God, this changes everything, because I'm married and I want to stay married. And I could imagine playing the same stupid little Mary Had a Little Lamb over and over again, and my wife slowly going crazy. And I thought, I can practice with headphones. This is really great. And I don't have to buy a huge piano and hire movers to put it where in my house. I can buy a thing the size of a large keyboard and stick it in this little niche that I've got. So I bought a Yamaha digital piano, so less than $1,000 with everything. It got a good pedal and all for it. So it pedaled like a real piano, which is really important. And that's how I started. And I just remember asking the guy when I bought the piano, do you have any books, or like, how do I learn this? I just thought I would just get some sheet music or something. I hadn't really thought it out. And he said, oh, here's this books that people use. And it was the Alfred's book for Alfred's adult piano series. And they have a 3 volume series for like adults learning piano. And I just bought the first one and got home and started looking at it. And over the next few days, started playing in it. And I realized, oh, this is really good. And I just went to Amazon and bought the other two. And then I formed my plan of what I was going to do and my plan for how I would actually stick with it in practice.
Yeah, I'm gonna interject here as a piano teacher. The Alfred's is a good method. The one criticism against it is was offset by the advantage that you had of knowing treble clef. So one of the criticisms is that it starts off with here's C D E F G for treble clef, here's C D E F G for bass clef. Somewhere around page 51, we're going to give you 5 new notes,
Yeah.
A, B, C, D, and stick with that. And then there's not an easy transition into when you get to the interval of the sixth, and now you have to like move out of the position and move around the keyboard and so forth. So that sometimes is a bit of a kind of a little bit of a learning shock for a lot of students. If you navigate that point well, you manage to learn your notes well. it's a fine method book once you get to that point right there.
Yeah, and here's where I really wonder, and I can never answer this question, but I wonder how much those 2 years of piano when I was 9 and 10 years old, how much muscle memory actually stuck with me. Because I actually was able to blow through before we talked today. I went back and looked at and I'll say I'm an engineer. I like spreadsheets. I like numbers. I kept records of everything I did. And so I recorded every day what pages I was playing in the book. I'm working on pages 50 to 61 today, and the next day 51 to 63. And then I would be stuck at those pages for a few days. But I slowly would march through the books playing little 4 or 5 pieces at a time over and over every day, and slowly inchwormed my way through the books. But I blew through the first 2/3 of that first book within a month. So I didn't, I think I must have had some sort of muscle memory from those 2 years, 30 something years ago, because I'll add that I started this shortly after my 48th birthday. And part of the impetus for starting this is, I was deeply into middle age, can't
Mhm.
deny it, and starting to wonder a lot of things. And one is, they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks and all this. And is it too late? Is it too late to learn new things? Is my brain turning to concrete, right? How much can you really learn as you get older? You hear about kids having this amazing capacity for learning. And I thought, well, yeah, that's true. But I was also really lazy as a kid and undisciplined. And I didn't have the perspective I have now. I couldn't understand the theory that I can easily understand now. And so, yeah, kids have advantages, but they have disadvantages too. And I decided a few things, but one was that I was gonna be really disciplined about it because I just had vision of this piano that I had just spent several $100s on, of it collecting dust and like mocking me as I walked by it every day. Because I'm like you, I have a lot of interests. I read a lot of books. Over my life, I've had a lot of little hobbies. I've been a dilettante on a lot of things. But with piano, I was like, I want to stick with this. I don't want to just play it for a few months and then just have it collect dust. But I know that the first few months are going to be, or the first however long is going to be really painful because you can't play anything that's really that great. You're playing really simple stuff. And so I had read this, well, no, I had never read this book, but I think I skimmed it in a bookstore many years ago, and I've heard people talk about it. It's that book where the guy talks about the 10,000 hour rule. What's the author?
Malcolm Gladwell, The Turning Point.
Exactly. So
Or,
yeah, I
or is it
remember
Outliers? Like it's one of
it
it,
was
I know
yeah,
it's Malcolm Gladwell.
all his books run together, right? But he had this concept or some idea that you achieve mastery of something after roughly 10,000 hours of doing it. And that idea kind of lodged in my head, and it's right and wrong in different ways, but whatever. But I think the thing that stuck with me is that for a lot of tasks, like with piano, it doesn't really matter how many years you've practiced piano. If somebody comes up to me and says, I played piano for 6 years. I don't really know if they're going to be any good or not, because I don't know if they practice once a week and they stopped for 6 months and then they did this and that, or if they were like every day nose to the grindstone. So I realized it doesn't matter. All that matters is the hours in the saddle. Like, how many hours have you been practicing, sitting on that bench, playing the piano in concentrated practice? And so I thought 10,000 hours, you got to start as a kid to do anything like that. And I don't really want to become some concert pianist. I just want to play for fun, but I want to get past that painful beginner stage. I really just want to be a decent intermediate pianist. I want to play like intermediate level stuff where it sounds good and it's fun and it's nice and it's not chopsticks or Mary Had a Little Lamb. So I decided I was going to set some milestone. And the first few days, this idea popped up that, okay, I just turned 48. 50 is looming, a big milestone birthday. And I said, okay, I'm going to try to practice 1,000 hours before I turn 50. So in the next 21 months or something, what it worked out to, I'm gonna accumulate 1,000 hours of practice. I figured if I do an hour and a half a day, I could do that. And it was still COVID, so my schedule was a little more flexible. I could squeeze in some practice in the morning. Then I wasn't doing an hour and a half at a stretch. A little in the morning, a little when I come home in the evening before dinner, a little after, more in the evening. But I thought if I get to 1,000 hours, I bet that I'll be an intermediate player. And so I just burned that belief in my mind that 1,000 hours was the magic number. And if I get to that point, then I will have some skill level that I'll be happy with and I'll be able to play interesting music. So that was my big sort of goal that I set.
I think I know from our talks you got to the 1,000 hours. What was your assessment of where you were when you got there? Did it meet your expectation at that point, or did it fall short in any way?
I think it largely met it. Yeah, I got to the point, I reached my milestone about 2 months early. So I really, I played, first of all, I enjoyed practice more than I thought I would. And that obviously, for anybody considering something like this, you have to enjoy the process. You can't say, well, I hate practicing, but I just want to be good and then I'll enjoy it. Well, find another hobby because it's really about the journey and not the destination with this sort of thing, especially as an adult where you're never gonna be a pro. You're never gonna be a session musician or anything like that. You're just playing for fun. But I I just looked it up today at the 1,000 hour mark. I had completed the first two Alfred's books volumes, and I had just started on the third volume. And for some people, that's like really slow progress because I think some people they would spend a week on a piece, and the next week they play the next piece, and so on. But I really I would stick with pieces until I got them, I would say 90% or 90% good. So some pieces I would play the same piece every night. Every night I'd play a piece for 10, maybe 15 minutes or something, one particular piece. And I'd play that piece sometimes 30, 40 days in a row till I got it really good. And maybe that means I'm slow. That's fine. I was happy with my progress. I was also doing scales, so I wasn't just doing the Alfreds. I did the Alfreds, and then I also, again, with the adult perspective, I said, "All right, I'm going to take my medicine. I'm going to eat my veggies. I'm going to learn scales." And I also had a resource where I have a coworker who he's an engineer like me, but he's a really talented guy. He's a double major, and he was a double major in college in electrical engineering and jazz piano performance. You want to talk
Mhm.
about talent. And so he was a really great resource. I could talk to him about piano stuff. And I remember talking to him about scales, going, do I really need to learn like all the scales? What about just like up to three or four sharps and flats? And he looked at me, he's like, just learn them all. Just, of course, the jazz guy is going to say that. But I thought, yeah, you're right. I should just learn them all. Every day, in addition to the Alfred stuff, I'd work on my scales, hands separate, and eventually hands together, major, all three minors. And so I was just working on that stuff. I did a few of the Hannons, not maybe just three or four of them.
Yeah.
I'd do them forte and piano to try to develop a touch. And then I would just to make it more fun and to more enjoyable, I would also, over those couple of years, I mixed in maybe a dozen pieces that I just found online from like these like music notes or whatever, these online sheet music companies. I'd find a piece that was about at my skill level and I'd buy it and print it out. And so I learned minuet in G, and then I learned some pieces from some movies or from some musicals. And so I always had something that was just my little fun piece in addition to the stuff in the books, though I really enjoyed a lot of the pieces in the books. I think there's some really well arranged pieces in those Alfred's books. So yeah, that's the long-winded way of saying when I got to 1,000 hours, I was maybe two-thirds of the way through all the books. I had a few pieces, like other pieces I'd learned that I really liked. I could play all 48 major and minor scales, both hands, two octaves. I felt really good about it, but I decided at that point I was just going to keep tracking my hours. I had a little calendar, like day planner thing by my piano, and I would write down my hours every day and where I was, what page numbers I was on. So I said, I'm just going to keep doing this till I finish the book. But I'm going to back off my hours. I've been playing like 2 hours a day. It was crazy. So I was like, all right, I don't have to play my Hannons anymore. I'm going to do less scales a day, but I'm going to keep working till I finish the third book. So it took another, at a much slower pace, maybe hour and 15 minutes a day. I eventually, after 3 years, 3 complete years of playing piano, I got through all three Alfred's books and I hit the 1,500 hour mark right at the 3 year mark. And right when I finished that third Alfred book, and I thought, that's a good point to stop my OCD obsession with recording my hours and tracking it in the spreadsheet and everything. It's been really motivating to watch this graph go up on my little spreadsheet of hours per over the time. But I'm just going to stop here and play for fun. And that was a year ago. So next in a few weeks, I hit my 4 year mark. And for the last year, I've just been I just go home and it's one of my entertainments in the evenings. I play for 30, 45 minutes in the evenings. I have a couple of pieces I'm working on and I'm playing some Scott Joplin pieces. But after whatever, 3 years, 1,500 hours, I can learn the entertainer, the full version from Scott Joplin. It takes me months to learn it. I'm not sight reading it. I'm terrible at sight reading still, but I can play like stuff where my friends are really impressed, and it's stuff that sounds really great, I think. And so I'm really happy with how it ended up.
Well, congratulations on your journey. I want to just hit just a few points of what you said, just that I think kind of harmonize with a lot of the things that I've talked about on here that I think are very important lessons. So I have a number of adult students that get really frustrated with their actual progress compared to what they think that they should be doing. But you chose a different measurement. You chose what you could control, which is how much time you're spending at the instrument rather than what kind of results you're getting. And you also recognize there's quantity and there's quality. You can measure success by a number of pieces, but also how well you do on each piece that you're playing. I like that you chose like a 90% number. For my own lessons, I say unless we're working on something for performance, I'm fine with 80 to 90%.
Yeah.
We move on, and the 100% is a myth. Like there's always something you do better.
Oh yeah. No, I never hit 100% on any piece.
I said, if we're trying to work on a performance, we're going to try to get in the 95 percentile mark. We're going to try to get close to 100 as we can, knowing that there's always going to be some imperfections, there's always going to be room for improvement. But
Yeah.
but I like that you just said the time that I spend is most important. Now, one of the things that they've said, people who have talked about the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour rule, is a bit of an arbitrary number, but what really distinguishes, or I guess what he got right, is it does take a high volume of practice. But what really distinguishes, say, your top tier musicians from everybody else is how much of that practice is deliberate practice and how much of it is really focused on something specific. So it's not just sitting at your instrument, but it's working on a certain type of scale. That I think that was really
Right.
helpful that you called them eating your vegetables, choosing to learn all of the scales because even Alfred's doesn't really cover all of the scales. So that was nice that
No.
you added that on to your list. Was there any point where you did feel frustrated and where you had to talk yourself into going to the next step? Was there any point where it just didn't feel like it was clicking as well?
So I will say I remember telling my wife that several times in the process, like you definitely see your weak points. It's sight reading for me. That's my weak point. And I know I worked through as part of those first 1,000 hours, I worked through a few like very low level sight reading books. So every day I would play a page of stuff I'd never seen before, but it was like really simple stuff. And it's still on my to-do list to maybe spend a year at some point in the future where every day I play just something new, even really poorly. But I'm still not happy with my complete inability to sight read. It's really slow for me to learn pieces. And I think I could sight read just treble clef pretty well, just bass clef pretty well, but you put the two hands together and chords, and oh boy, it's so slow. And I don't know why. So that's been I guess, a disappointment, but you're not going to be the best at everything. And so you just, I will say though, the intensity of the practice, it made it easier to keep going because when you're practicing 7 days a week for over an hour a day, you honestly see progress week to week for sure. Sometimes day to day. You always have those days where you feel like you're sliding back, but like for sure progress week to week, every single week, because you're playing like 10 hours a week. And so I know it's hard to find the time and all, but it's honestly easier to keep motivated when you're playing so much that you're always seeing visible progress. And then I did the OCD engineer thing of tracking my progress on spreadsheets quantitatively with what page number I was at and how many hours I'd accumulated. And that really helps me. It's like the dumbest way you can gamify something, right? But it's, hey, and then the other thing is, if your goal is not, I think I'll be good after 3 years of playing piano, there's nothing you can do to make that 3 years go by any faster. But if you say, I think I'll be good after X number of hours, you can always say, well, you know what? I think I could put in another half hour tonight. Or like this morning, I could probably get in another half hour. That'll get me a little closer to that goal. So there's much more of an incentive to like always squeeze in a little more practice because you have control over getting closer to your goal versus thinking about another year's gone by. Where am I?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And by the way, after we're done, I can give you some resources for sight reading. In fact, we've had a past guest on here named David Holter. Probably would recommend you check out his episode. He's got a program that's very helpful, designed for pianists to get better at sight reading. And
Yeah.
I can turn you on to him. But because a lot of it is so when I got to college and majored in music, and I have said this multiple times on this platform, I was not a good sight reader. It was a big weakness compared to everything else
Yeah.
I did. So I had to study how to sight read, and there's an art to it. It's not just
I've
putting
listened to your
something new.
podcast, so yeah, I've heard some of it. It's yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
but
it just takes it takes just working on approaching the music a little bit differently. But yeah, I'll share that resource when we're done. And anyways, I think this is very helpful. So you're up to unarranged original Scott Joplin, and that is quite an achievement. The entertainer, that is, you can argue about whether or not that's intermediate or early advanced or whatever, but that is a challenging piece, and it's nice that you're able to work on something like that. And did you do any like classical pieces outside of what Alfred's like any kind of sonatinas or sonatas?
yeah, I did Minuet in G very early because I had seen that as like people had said, oh, Minuet in G, if you can do this, then you're at this level or whatever. And so I was curious. So I did that very early on. Other than that, I've liked the classical stuff that I've played as part of Alfred. The last thing that I played was the Moonlight Sonata, first movement, and I loved it. Beautiful piece. And there was a Chopin piece in the second book, I think I loved. But I find myself not seeking out classical. The stuff I really is, I'd say, composed between 1880 and say late 19th and early 20th century. I like Joplin. I like Eric Satie. I like jazz stuff. I'm learning some early jazz standards now. Played classically, of course. I'm learning the written pieces. I'm not improvising, but that's what I really like. There's another thing I want to mention that I did that really helped. 1,000 hours is a huge thing. It's important to develop I think, to have little milestones along the way that are like much more achievable than just 1,000 hours a couple of years from now. It's hard to stay motivated. So another really nice thing about, I would say, like the modern digital pianos is that you can record things in them. And it sounds great because you're not recording over a microphone in an echoey room. It's just recording it digitally. And you can stream it over to stream it to my laptop in Audacity, and you got an MP3. So I decided, since I was not playing recitals like I would if I had a piano teacher, I decided that every 100 hours, roughly, when I hit 100 hours, 200 hours, 300 hours, I would do a quote unquote recital where I would record two or three pieces that I really liked from that last 100 hours. I would spend a couple of days or a couple of evenings just trying to playing them again and again until I could get them with relatively no mistakes, record them in the piano, transfer them to the laptop, and then I would email my parents and my brother and sister and say, hey, I'm at 400 hours. Here's a couple of pieces that I learned that I liked. And my mom loved it because she always was like, she was so devastated, apparently, that I quit piano. And so she was so happy that 38 years later, I took it up again. And so it was fun to share it with them. And it made me take a few pieces during that time and really get them up to 98% to record them. And now I have a record. I have folders on my computer now with, oh, these were the pieces I learned at 100 hours, 200, 300 hours. And so that was really fun milestones. And it was like little goals to look forward to. And then I would get feedback from my friends or family who I emailed them to. And so that was a really important, I think, thing to do along the way.
Well, your story, I hope, will inspire a lot of listeners. I know that we have some adults that listen that are they're not seeking to become professional musicians. They're just seeking to get better at it. And I'm not sure what the title of this episode will be. I have a working title, but I may have to work into an engineer's perspective on the title.
Middle aged, how to deal with a midlife crisis through piano. I don't know.
Well, there's far worse ways to deal with it.
Yes, there are. No, this was, I would say, starting a new hobby. You look at it and you go, well, okay, I'm 48. Well, if I get good at piano by 50, then I'll hopefully have many decades to enjoy it. But what if it takes me three times as long? And it's not till I'm 54 or 56. Well, who cares? You still got plenty of years ahead of you, right? So that's the way I looked at it. I tried to make this artificial sense of urgency, but I
Mhm.
also realized that just enjoy the process. And even if it takes 6, 8 years, you still got so much time after that to enjoy playing the material. And like you said, there's no real finish line. You're always getting a little bit better and you're always learning new things. I'd say one of the favorite things I did is, which you can also do with a digital piano because you can play with headphones, is my wife is a huge fan of Peanuts, the comic strip by Charles Schultz. Huge. And so I learned at some point, probably in a year or two or so, I learned Linus and Lucy, the famous piece that everybody knows, one of the greatest piano pieces to just have in your back pocket. And I practiced it for 2 months or so, only on headphones. And then on her birthday, I played it for her and surprised her. And so that was a lot of fun and just an example of how much I've enjoyed the hobby. And it's fun to just be able to pull that out and play it.
Yeah. Well, excellent. So, congratulations. And are you just enjoying it for fun now and just still are you still logging everything or are you just
No, when I hit a year ago, when I hit 3 years and finished that third Alfred book and 1,500 hours, I said, if I don't stop logging this now, I'm never going to stop. And this is going to become a weird kind of OCD thing. So I stopped, but I was a little worried that if I stopped logging the hours, that I would stop playing because it was like this watching this number go up kept me going. But it's been a year now, and I just go home and I play most nights, but I don't have to play every night. I'm not, but most weeks I play 7 days a week in the evenings. I enjoy it so much more than like the mediocre streaming shows that I watched in its place. And yeah, I'm working on Bethana. If there's a Scott Joplin piece called Bethana, it's a concert waltz that he wrote, and to me, it is one of the most beautiful pieces I've ever heard. I've been working on it for months. I'm about halfway through it. It'll take me many more months to finish it, but I'm working on some pieces that I absolutely love and a jazz piece that I found online. So yeah, I just I like to have two or three pieces that I'm working on, and then I always play some stuff to keep up stuff that I like that I have memorized. I like to have a handful of pieces memorized, mostly because I'm not very good at sight reading, but it's also nice if you're somewhere you can just play a few pieces. So I just, yeah, have the stuff that I like, and I'm always learning two or three new things.
Oh, excellent. This is the part of the interview where I'd have you share your social media, but you're not on social media, and I don't think you have any musical albums or anything you want to sell. But if there's anything you
And
want
that,
to share, this is a point you could.
I was gonna say that's how I had time to learn piano, is I'm not on social media. No, I got off social media a few years ago, and one of the things when I started piano is I decided I can find a lot of time if I just cut out like watching mediocre TV and like surfing the web too much. So I cut it out. I found an extra hour a night or whatever, and I don't miss that stuff at all. But yeah, if anybody wants to contact me, they can contact you and you can put them in touch with me.
Sure. All right. Well, it's been great hearing your updates throughout the years and hear that you've stuck with it and you found a way to gamify your success, which I'm fully in support of. I wish more students would take that approach, and I think success would happen more often. So, thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you. Really great catching up, David.
And that's going to wrap up my conversation and just about wrap up today's episode. So many takeaways from that conversation that, and I'm just going to share just a very few. The biggest one, because we talked about it a lot, so I hope you caught this already. The hours you spend practicing are what you should be measuring, not the number of days. So that's my first takeaway, is that you should be logging your hours and keeping track of that. And your goal should be built around spending hours at your instrument and not just how many days that you do that. The second thing that I want to take away is the importance of technique. And he referred to it as eating your vegetables. And I have used that term with others, with other students before. The technique is, I think it's hard for most of us to overestimate how important it is. Even when you think you know your technique, you should still be working on it to fine tune it, to get better and better and make it more and more effortless. If you're trying to learn on repertoire alone, it's very hard to do that. At least it's hard to do it well. And then the third thing is you should be playing what you want to play, not just what you think you should play. Now, of course, you can mix in some of that. You can learn some things just to say that you've learned them. Like, I read some books every now and then, or watch some movies that are, acclaimed. They're ones that you say you should do. It took me 3 tries to get through James Joyce's Ulysses. I finally did. It wasn't one that I read for the sheer enjoyment of it, but I got something out of it. And you can do that too with some of these pieces of music that people should say that you should learn. And, you might just enjoy it. I've also read some books and watched some movies that I only did because of the acclaim and ended up really liking them. So what did you get out of this conversation? And also, do you have a success story that you would also like to share? You can share with your own voice by going to speakpipe.com/musician toolkit. That link is in the show notes. And you can just simply record your own voice. And I can't promise that I will use that in a future episode, but I will definitely strongly consider it. And I will, at the very least, listen to what you say and be grateful. But if you don't want your voice on a future episode, you just want to share your story with me privately, you can do that by going to davidlanemusic.com and using the contact form on the home page. And just let me know all about your success as an ongoing student. As a reminder, the best way to keep up with this podcast is to subscribe and maybe even have notifications on for your podcast app or on YouTube. Again, if you're watching there, you're already there. Just make sure you're subscribed. If you're not, you want to check out the podcast in that form, you can go to YouTube. My channel is at David Lane Music 1, the number 1. The other way is eventually I will start posting per episode or about each episode in email newsletters. That probably won't happen until late spring, maybe even early summer. It's an ongoing slow process to get to that point. However, if you are interested and you want to be on that list, just send me a message, again, at davidlanemusic.com on the homepage. And just, you don't even have to say anything, just put subscribe in the subject, and I will take it from there. Okay, so that's going to wrap up today's episode. It's one that I greatly enjoyed. I hope that you also enjoyed it as well. I look forward to being back with you again next week. Until then, thank you so much for listening.